Hey everyone, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I'm glad that you chose this today. We got Reed. We're going to talk to a retired Navy SEAL of over 30 years who started out enlisted. He's also the author of The Leadership Killer, Reclaiming Humility in Age of Arrogance. Really, really important stuff here. So, Captain John, Coach Havlik is a U.S. Navy SEAL retired. He led special operations teams around the world during his 31-year naval career. As I said, he's the co-author of The Leadership Killer, Reclaiming Humility in an Age of Arrogance, which you can learn more about at leadershipkiller.com. And currently, he's the CEO of JRH Consulting in Tampa, Florida, which I just learned he's right down the street from me. And he's a special advisor for Giant Leap Consulting, a courage-building company in Asheville, North Carolina. And I am just delighted that he's here. Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Good, Phil. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're just down the street, throwing distance from me.
Yeah, pretty cool. Well, you'd have to have maybe John Elway's arm, but he got Joe Flacco, so I don't think that his brains are as good as his arm was picking up Flacco, man. That's just not one of his better moves, but oh well. Whatever.
We'll see. It always depends on which Flacco shows up. You know?
That is for sure. That's for sure. So, hey, so let's rewind a little bit here, Coach. So you're a SEAL for over 30 years, but you told me you had to start out and enlist. You had to go through boot camp. So what the heck? Why did you go through boot camp and then become a SEAL? That's pretty crazy.
Well, I swam in college. That was a big thing for me, and so I did a little coaching after when I got my degree, and I was recruited by the Naval Academy to coach swimming at the academy. But part of the deal is there were actually 9 of us in 9 different sports, and the deal was we had to go to boot camp, successfully complete boot camp, and then we would get assignment to the Naval Academy for 3 years. And that was kind of that was the Academy's way of paying for a coach by going the civilian route. So I was coaching there and doing my thing, and I met a SEAL who used to come down and swim all the time, and got to be friends with him and talk to him, and he showed me the videos and gave me the Kool-Aid, and I drank it. And part of the deal, though, when I was going to try for SEAL school was I wanted to become an officer. And, after coaching at the academy, I'm going, well, if these guys and gals can be officers, then I can be an officer too. So I'm just as good as they are. So I worked with the guys at the academy to put a package together to get accepted by officer candidate school. And then once I finished that, to go to training right afterwards. So that's kind of the quick story on how I started out in the Navy.
Cool. So you went to Bud. So what was your rate though, or did you immediately go officer at SEAL?
Well, when I went through, I was ensign when I went through.
Okay, got it. Super cool. So I got to ask before we get even further. I know that the SEAL patch is called the Budweiser. Why do they call it the Budweiser, Coach?
Because it looks like the eagle on the Budweiser bottle.
Ah.
So that's the nickname. Everybody calls it the Trident, and that's what we shoot for. But a lot of people do call it the Budweiser. And as far as I know, in my 30 years, it always just kind of fell back to the eagle on the Budweiser bottle. So.
Cool. That's cool. I always wanted to ask a SEAL that because, us guys that weren't SEALs, we heard rumors about that, it's because it's the king of all designations, right? Just like Budweiser's the king of beers and other sordid stories. So I can see that though. It's like the Budweiser Eagle. That's probably one of the more G-rated versions, huh?
Well, that's what I know. I'm sure there's others who have more history, but as far as I know, it stems back to Budweiser beer bottle, and I drank many of those, so I think I can confirm it. So.
There you go. That's cool. So what was the biggest lesson that you learned when you were in the SEALs?
I think the big thing for me was as an officer, they rode officers really hard, and And that's because there's not a lot of them. And ultimately, they want guys who can make a decision. And so what I learned quickly was to make a decision, hopefully it was the right one, and that to take care of my men. And because the men and the mission are always more important than yourself. And so they quickly, day in, day out, they preach that to you. And so when you graduate, get through and you make it through, I think the big thing for me was make a decision, trust your guys, and always think about the mission first.
Yeah, men in the mission, really important, I think, for leaders, regardless of whether you're in the service or not. And that's interesting that you would say that because, again, as an outsider looking in, often we see the bravado of the SEAL, right? They're the best and they're pretty badass and they do crazy, awesome stuff that nobody else does. And some would say, right, SEAL Team 6 if they really exist. But yet that's really a humble thing, Coach, to say the men in the mission before me, really, really strong. So I'm guessing you learned early on then, like your book is titled, right, The Leadership Killer, that being an arrogant leader is really not a way to get ahead, huh?
Not in the teams. No way. Those guys, the guys I worked with, extremely brave, but extremely smart too. And they can call you out in a minute and you have to quickly learn to rely on them because they come with all the corporate knowledge, especially the junior officer. And you're going to be the officer, you're going to make a decision. But those guys, you can make them part of the process because if you don't, they're going to alienate you. And like any relationship, they can make you look good, they can make you look bad. But those guys had all the corporate knowledge, and you were a fool if you didn't listen to them and take them into consideration when you're doing some planning. Absolutely.
Interesting. So that's kind of different. Is that different, or maybe is that the same as coaching? I mean, is there similarities, or what do you think?
Well, I think coaching helped me a lot. Just kind of to gauge people, and then going through boot camp, kind of getting a little bit of exposure to the enlisted mentality. But I think what coaching helped me as an officer was you have to make a decision, you got to do what's right for the group, whoever you're coaching, what the goals are, what the is at the end of the year, your championships and swimming fast, and kind of same thing in the team. You're planning, looking, for the mission and what's best at the end. So yes.
Yeah. Cool. So how long has the Leadership Killer, how long has this book been kind of percolating inside you until you finally realize that, it's time that you get this out? Because you have a co-author, which I think is really cool on this, right? You've got Bill Treasurer who co-authored this with you, but was this something you guys came up with together, or is this something you realized and you needed somebody to kind of bring in the civilian side, or how did this come about?
No, Bill and the short story is Bill and I both went to West Virginia. I swam, he dove, and we kind of we met up again after about 30 years, a few years back at a reunion. And Bill has his Giant Leap Consulting, that courage leading company in Asheville that I'm special advisor for. And we started talking, and he would bring me in every now and then to talk about leadership to his seminars. And so we always seemed to be talking. It always seemed that we would text each other or send each other an email or talk about some leader almost every day that did something that was just totally out of character and not right. And most of it was because they had big heads and they got cocky and think they get caught. And so Bill had written 4 books beforehand, and he kind of mentioned one day, he goes, "Hey, I'm thinking about writing a 5th book. How'd you co-author it?" And I'd be like, "Absolutely." So when we originally started the book, we kind of identified 10 different traits that make good leaders go bad. But after a couple of months of writing and talking, we just kind of just whittled it down to one, and that's hubris, because we felt that all the others kind of branched off from hubris and really getting cocky, getting a huge ego, a swelled head, as we called it, really kind of is the one major flaw to what makes a good leader go bad. And so that was the gist of the book. And so we both kind of coordinated with each other and made the decision to write it. And then I throw it out there. Bill did the heavy lifting on the writing, but we shared ideas and, my stories. And we thought it was a good combination of, 30 years in military. He's got about 30 years in the corporate and business side of the house. And it's a good mixture, a lot of good stories. So that was the gist of the book.
Cool. Well, that's so interesting that you can combine that and yeah, the stories I think are what make the book. So hubris, though, let's dive a little bit deeper, because that's that's kind of a loaded word, right? I don't think anybody thinks that they don't have, that they either they have too much of it, or they don't have any of it, or they're just completely unaware of what actually they have. So how does one kind of get started down the wrong path, if you will, to getting to the point where they're just going to end up a bad leader?
Well, I think when Bill and I talked about it, whatever profession you're in, whether you're military, business, athletics, education, however you do it, as you rise the corporate ladder, you get more perks. And, you get the parking space, get the better office, you get more people that respond to your whims, your beck and call. And more people kind of want to hang out with you and start calling you sir, especially, as in the Navy, you get up there as the XO, executive officer, and you're the commanding officer, you're the man, and you treat him accordingly. And so you can tend to get swallowed up in that and think you are super important or more important than everyone else. And you tend to kind of look outside the boundaries of what you really need to do and kind of take advantage of the system or people to get more perks. And that's really kind of where I've seen a lot of good leaders go bad, is they just abuse that. And when they know it's wrong. And so that's where we kind of got the hubristic side of the house. And a lot of people don't, hey, I'm getting hubristic. A lot of people just say, he's getting really cocky or something like that. And being an athlete and a leader, there's a fine line. You want, when I came out of SEAL training, I was super cocky, That's the way they trained us. And you got to have that. You got to have that to do what they ask of you to do. Same thing in the sports world. You want confident athletes because that leads to success. That leads to winning. And so you have to find that fine line and balance it accordingly.
Excellent. And I totally agree. I mean, it is a fine line between, confident, cocky, arrogant, and just completely gone wrong. So one of the points you make, though, and you just kind of remade that, and you make this in the book a lot, is you don't have to be a bad person to be a leader. But, Coach, I got to tell you, man, I don't think anybody ever wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I'm a bad person. So what does that actually mean for a leader, that they don't have to be a bad person to be a leader?
Well, I think you've probably seen it, and we've all seen it. Some people don't handle leadership well, or be in a position. And even I grew, when I retired 30 years later, I was nothing like when I was an ensign coming out, and I did some things right and I did some things wrong. And that's what we talk about in the book. But I didn't come out to be a cocky leader. It's just kind of the way you had to be, when you're, at least for me, when you're dealing with super type A personalities, you need to come in there and take charge. And you got to kind of have a similar personality, or as I mentioned earlier, the guys will eat you up. And so, and you your head tends to swell, and you start, I think people kind of become hubristic because for two reasons. They don't think anybody will tell on them, and they don't think anybody will notice. And I saw that on many leaders, and I tried to avoid that, but I had my temptations as like everybody. So I think that was the hard part. And I think people, like I said, everybody starts giving you a lot of perks, calling you sir or captain or the boss. It goes to your head, and you get cocky and you want more,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's for sure. So that's very interesting. Those two reasons that you said, they don't think anybody's going to tell on them. Basically, they're not going to call me on my stuff because I'm a leader, because I'm, above them and I have power. So they're not going to, and then we don't think they're going to notice. And I want to attack that first one first is, people that report to you are a lot smarter than you think they are. They notice everything. They're paying attention to everything because they're looking for the leader to set the vision and to set the pace. I mean, the speed of the team is the speed of the leader. And yet you say, right, that they don't think people will notice. I mean, where does that come from? I mean, I've seen this too, and I'm genuinely curious, like, where does that even come from, Coach? Why are people arrogant enough to think that people aren't paying attention?
Well, I think the bottom line to me is in my experiences, I just think as you get a leader, you think you know everything and you're better than everybody else, and kind of the minions aren't as smart as you think they are. And I found out very early that one of the best things I do and one of the tips I offer was, and you probably can relate with this, is when I was at my first executive officer job, I kept hearing from the sailors that leadership didn't know what's going on around the command. I don't know if you heard that or.
Oh yeah.
You've been assigned. And when I got into a leadership position, I was like, hey, they're talking about me. And so what don't I know? So the best thing I ever did was I forced myself to get away from my desk, and I'd go down and I'd walk the deck plates and I'd talk to my sailors and I'd try to get to know them. And, I checked my ego. I left it in the office, and I just opened my ears and I asked them and tried to be honest with them and talk to them as a person. And it was invaluable on the, getting to know my people and getting things done, because it's a great time for you, especially if you're trying to, I hear a lot of, I got to change the culture, and if you're trying to change culture, everybody has to get on board. And if you're the only one who understands what you're trying to do, then everybody else is going to fight it until they understand why you're doing it and how it's going to happen. And that I learned that big time in the Navy. And so that's what I did. I mean, I quickly realized that I wasn't the smartest, and the sailors on the deck plate know what's going on around the command. And so I made it a point to ask them.
Yeah. Wow. So early, that's super different than a lot of the military leaders that I saw that did not manage by walking around, that did not have a clue. I mean, that's where that comes from. I mean, many times command stays in their office, and unless somebody comes to them with something, they're busy doing paperwork, looking at evals, right? Things that have nothing to do with the day-to-day mission. But by walking around and going on the deck plate, or, just getting out of your office and actually talking to people, you stand a much better chance of figuring out, hey, so first of all, you get to see performance like up close. So you can be way more specific in your feedback. I mean, if I see you sloughing off, I can correct that much faster than if I hear that third hand from, your lead petty officer, right? If you're in command. So I think that's really interesting that you said that. So do you think that, is that hubris that keeps us in our office, or is that just habit, or what do you think that is, Coach?
I think the phrase "we're too busy" is overused.
Yeah.
And I think you got to make time. That's what as you're familiar, that I use the field day, the command field day on a Friday, to because that's normally the XO's big thing, to walk around and make sure the command is clean. And I used to grab the command duty officer, and I would let him do the inspection, and I would walk around, and then I would just talk to my people. And I didn't, I let him kind of handle the CDO, kind of do that. What was important to me was learning. And I think the hubristic part that a lot of leaders can't handle is having somebody junior say, things are messed up. This is what you got to do, and this is why this is happening around the command. And sometimes it can be a slap in the face. And if you're not ready for it, no one likes somebody to question you, especially when you're in a leadership role. And you have to swallow that hubris. And if you're going to talk to the troops, you got to stand by for honest feedback, because they're going to give it to you. But I think that's why I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of commands, whatever, fail, because the leader doesn't listen.
That makes a lot of sense, and that makes me think. I mean, a lot of the requests of millennials are that they want more consistent feedback, that they want to know that they're plugged into leadership. And it sounds like early on you got that. You figured that out. Like, you recognize that your sailors, the folks that reported to you, wanted more. They wanted to share. They wanted to tell you what's going on. They wanted to provide feedback. And what I find really cool is that you listen to that. You took action on that. So do you have an example, Coach, that you can share with us maybe about one time when that happened, so we can understand a little bit more about that?
Well, like I said, when my first overseas job in a big leadership position I was the number 2 guy at a boat unit in Panama. And we had a lot of issues, just a lot of, started at the top and it came down. And I spent about the first 6 months just chained to my desk, doing paperwork and evals, and not, thinking that I was doing the right thing and trying to change a culture that had been set for a long time. And so what I found out was I had to do some major. I had to throw some people out. I had to get rid of some people. I had to change the way things were being done. And then, like I mentioned, I started hearing that the leadership at this command doesn't know what's going on. And so I had to push away from my desk, make the time to go down and talk to the sailors and learn from them. And then I'd say, and they would ask me, why are we doing this? And I would tell them why. This is the way I see it. This is what needs to be done. And everything I did, I pre-coordinated with my commanding officer and my senior enlisted command master chief. So we were all talking the same vision. It wasn't just me going rogue on the command. Everything I did and was trying to do was in line with what the commanding officer wanted to do. And so the top 3 were all on the same sheet of music, but I was kind of the voice, and I would go down and tell these guys what we're doing, why we're doing it. And it got a lot of buy-in, and, but it also answered some things that, sometimes I don't know what's going on, or we don't know, or why things are being done. And that's, that's what I did, so that was, to me, the best example of what I learned, and quickly learned from when I was in the SEALs of, you got to listen to your men, take it on. You're ultimately going to make the decision, and as I found out as I got more experience, I usually had a way of doing things, or at least a plan of how I wanted to execute. But it was important to get everybody's opinion, to get total buy-in on what we're going to do the op. So.
Absolutely. I like, you start at the top, you make sure you get buy-in up there, and then you can filter that down, helping them understand the why, so that when you talk to your people, you share as much as you can, but sometimes you say that you don't know, which is 3 words, I don't know, often don't come out of leaders' mouths.
Well, I wouldn't say I don't know. I said, well, I didn't know that,
Okay.
I didn't know that, and which was okay, it's the same thing, tomato, tomato, however you want to do it. But what was the beauty of it, and what I think the Navy was very good at was top three, the CO, AXO, and the Command Master Chief, all as one voice, And there were a lot of closed door sessions, but, I'm executing what the commanding officer's policies are, And the Command Master Chief is the senior and speaks for the troops or the sailors. And so it was important we all spoke the same because, like I said, I didn't want to be a rogue going off and doing my own thing and be counter to what the CO wanted done. So it was important. And I think that's the most important thing I ever learned in the Navy was when the top three is solid and speaking in one voice, the command is usually pretty good, and organization runs well.
Definitely. The stronger the head is, the stronger the body is, because that's going to help that through, help your sailors, help your people that report to you get more done with that. As we kind of move ahead here, Coach, you have a pop-up on your website that asks a really interesting question. It stopped me in my tracks. It says, will you rule or will you lead? So what's the difference, Coach?
Well, I think ruling comes in when you're super hubristic and it's my way or the highway, and open to suggestions. Just like I said, my way or the highway. And there's plenty of guys. I can tell you, the special operations field is full of people like that. But that's just the nature of the beast, The other thing, that's how I think of ruling. Leading, to me, is doing what's right for the organization or the mission, and I'm a very big proponent of getting people's input, because then you get total buy-in. Everybody's involved, and they have a piece of the pie. So, if you want success, then you got to give good input. So that's, to me, is the difference between ruling and leading.
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Well, it sounds like leadership is a lot of work, though, Coach. I mean, why, if it's going to be this much work, why would anyone choose to lead?
Well, and most of the guys used to tell me because I got more pay, which is, well, at least I don't know. That's what everybody kept saying is, because I would ask them, why don't you become an officer? And it's like, no way, I don't want the paperwork, that comes with it. But they always want the pay, So I think, yes, there's perks involved. Yes, so you get more pay. Like I said, you get the better parking spot, things like that. But yeah, leadership is hard. I mean, I went to a leadership school in the Navy and command leadership when I screened for command. And first thing they tell you is leadership is lonely and it's hard, And it certainly is, because you are accountable for everything and anything in your command. And so leadership, and I'm sure you saw it when I first got in, I used to see some commanding officers who were afraid to leave the office, or go on, take leave or whatever, because they just thought the command was going to fall apart when they leave. And that, to me, was weak leadership, because you got to train your people to take care of things when you're not around. And so I learned that very quickly.
So, Coach, if we don't have, many people, though, aren't going to get the benefit of military leadership training. They might not get any leadership training. So is there anything that we can do if we don't have that training to hold ourselves accountable and make sure that we're not behaving in a hubristic way, that we're leading correctly, and not just pushing people, not just ruling people?
Well, I think you don't really need military. I mean, if you were an athlete, you've got coaches. And, the one thing I didn't do very well early on in my career was whatever field you go into, there's plenty of more senior folks, older folks that could be mentors, and you can rely on them for advice, especially as you move up their career path, or if you're deciding to do something, bounce ideas off them, see how they would, how they would do things. There's so much opportunity out there. Your military, yes, it's easy, but when I've even talking with all the businesses, especially with Bill, there's a lot of training that goes on, and the good companies identify their leaders and start training them just like they do in the military very early on to ultimately take over. And so I think the most successful organizations have already recognized that and, take steps towards training their people to be better leaders, better managers, things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The best organizations totally get that. They get their people out front and they get their buy-in. They help them lead a little bit before they have to lead a lot bit. Right? They let them lead little projects or little teams or little things before they ask them to lead a command or lead a department or division or anything like that. Right. That's typically helpful. So, well, Coach, we're going to wrap this up here, but we talk about the leadership killer, right? It's all about being too hubristic, right? Not having any humility in this age of arrogance. But if there was one thing, maybe it's something you've already said, or maybe it's something you haven't yet said, what's one thing, one bit of encouragement and one bit of, hey, do this sooner than later, and this will help you on the path to being a better leader?
Well, I think the best thing as you rise up the leadership chain, although I didn't do this very well and I learned late in life, there's two things I wish I'd have done better. And that was to get a mentor, because as we had just talked about, they can kind of help you along as you develop. And the second thing is to kind of get better educated on the politics, office politics, so to speak, of the organization that you're in. I didn't do that very well. And there's a game that has to be played. And if you play it right, you're going to do okay. But if you fight it and ignore it, kind of like what I did, it can come back and bite you. And so those are the two things I always offer and I tell kids, whether it's boot camp or, future officers, I've talked to a lot of ROTC and some academies, and I go, look, there's office politics and get a sea daddy, as a Navy, mentor or a sea daddy, somebody that you can rely on for advice up and down, up the chain. So.
Great advice. So so those two real quick, folks, are get a mentor as soon as you can. If you're in the military, if you're in the Navy, it's a sea daddy, and I totally remember that for sure. And then get better educated about the office politics so you can navigate through the organization and see what people know. And that often happens because you have a mentor who understands that first. So if you're young and you're kind of new to the whole thing, you can get awfully frustrated because not all, the fastest, the biggest, the strongest, the smartest don't always get promoted, and often it's who you know. And if you don't know that, you're going to be very frustrated as you go through life. Yeah. Great point. So, folks, if you want more from Coach, you should definitely check out his website, Coach Havlik. That's CoachHavlik.com. Or if you want to check out the book, go to leadershipkiller.com, just like it sounds, leadershipkiller.com. Coach, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. Thanks for 31 years of awesome service. I can't wait to get together and have a beer, a cup of coffee, and get to know you more. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate the invite.
My pleasure.